truth is unyielding, and its sting penetrates deeper than any physical wound. They never intended to obliterate you completely. That would have been too transparent, too swift, too simple to identify. Their genuine objective was far more calculated. To dismantle you incrementally in front of others until your self-worth buckled under the burden of disgrace. They wanted you to suffer quietly while they maintained a facade of kindness. Let's be perfectly clear. You endured what most individuals could not withstand, because what you confronted wasn't random conflict, and it wasn't merely a difficult life phase. It was orchestrated. It was a performance. It was a ceremony of shame intended to crush your resolve with an audience looking on. This is a tactic employed in corrosive hierarchies, manipulation circles, and even cultish environments where public shaming is the most ancient tool they possess. Why? Because humiliation's damage isn't momentary. It's engineered to leave a permanent mark, to label you, to force you to bear the burden of a falsehood that was never yours to carry. And whether you were aware of it or not, you weren't a participant in that ceremony. You were the central figure in their ritual. Reflect for a moment. Recall how they concealed it. They named it support. They presented it as guidance. They positioned it as you requiring a difficult lesson, but in truth, it was nothing short of a psychological execution masked by pleasantries. They didn't merely wish to quiet you. They wanted you to question your own reality. They wanted you to feel sorry for being hurt after they inflicted the wound. And here's the reality that disturbs them the most. You didn't provide the collapse they hoped for. You didn't lose your composure. You didn't plead for their validation, and you didn't even reveal them directly. Instead, you perceived, and that's what preserved you. Because perception is fatal to controllers. It's the internal whisper that alerts you when something is wrong. The instinct that causes you to move away before the snare shuts. While they assumed you were immobilized, you were assessing. While they practiced their performance, you were anticipating their dialogue before they uttered it. That's why you remain standing now while they linger in the background, fearing you will reveal the pattern to others. Awakened souls, if you've ever sensed this deeply, pause here and press the like button, subscribe, and help amplify this message. This is more than a video. It's a shift. Every click, every share is a method to illuminate what they attempted to hide. Thank you for being present. Thank you for joining this cause. Now let's explore further. The quiet after what you endured isn't void. It's full of potential. It's like existing in the calm after a tempest where the atmosphere has shifted. Thesky seems more transparent, and the land still holds the echo of turmoil. That's your current position. The individuals who tried to eliminate you are disturbed by that silence because it signifies their scheme was unsuccessful. They observe you progressing on your own journey, not defeated but more defined. And it frightens them because now every action you take is a testament to the conflict they did not win. If life were a series, that ceremony would have been the climactic ending. Every gaze was fixed on you, anticipating your downfall, waiting for the conclusion of your narrative. But here's the revelation. You continued the story, and now the harmful influences aren't in the narrative. You're turned with a new direction, one they can't interpret, one they can't distort. And that's why they're anxious. Because ceremonies of shame are meant to conclude with silence and surrender, but instead yours concluded with endurance, understanding, and strength. Examine history and you'll observe the cycle. Existence consistently reveals those who plot in darkness. Every community that employed disgrace for power eventually disintegrated under its own falsehoods. Every manipulator who believed they could eliminate someone ended up eliminated themselves by reality, by revelation, or by the mass of their own remorse. You're positioned in that same cycle right now. Their attempt to suppress you has already become the proof that elevates you. And this isn't merely about endurance. It's about awakening. You now comprehend the structure. You've witnessed behind the scene. You realize why they required you to be fragile, why your awareness was a danger, and why your quiet wasn't acceptance. It was a plan. They misjudged your perseverance, your capacity to withstand without yielding. They believed pulling you through adversity would reduce you to dust. Instead, you became evidence that the fire could not consume you. The narrative they attempted to assign to you is concluded. You control the story now, and existence has a way of ensuring that no ceremony of shame, no matter how intense or brutal, ever has the concluding statement. The concluding statement belongs to you, your perception, your fortitude, your steady power that remained firm when the audience was expecting you to yield. That's the reality they cannot remove. And pay close attention, awakened one, because this isn't just another account you discovered online. This is your guide to survival shaped from struggle you understand intimately. You experienced a ceremony of shame designed to leave you exposed. Yet here you are, still breathing, still more defined than they ever anticipated. That alone demonstrates you're not common. Most would have surrendered. Most would have been consumed by the disgrace. But you did not, and that's why you're here with me now. So here's what you need to do. If you recognize deeply that perception saved your life, leave the number 777 in the comments. That's the symbol of someone who sees beyond the disguises. Someone who understands the peril of being conscious in a world that prefers unaware. And if this message is resonating deeply, don't just listen passively. Press that like button, subscribe, and unite with this collective voice of those who have endured. Every click maintains this truth, because now we're going to analyze it all step by step. And trust me, if you are truly awakened, you'll feel the urge to remain until the conclusion. Let's begin. Number 1. They attempted to drag you through filth because your illumination revealed their stains. They didn't confront you because you were vulnerable. They confronted you because you uncovered what they wanted concealed. Let's name it accurately. They didn't shame you because they believed you were inferior. No, your being was the reflection that showed just how tainted they truly were. You entered environments where falsehoods were the norm, where manipulation was the greeting, and where treachery was simply another tactic. You didn't follow those rules. You didn't yield to the hidden agreements. And your lucidity, your integrity, your refusal to conform to corruption, that's what made them falter. So they used the most ancient weapon available, soiling your reputation. If they could tarnish you, if they could damage your standing, then perhaps they could make others overlook the truth your very presence introduced. Because here's the difficult reality. They didn't desire your absence. They desired you questioned. They didn't want to eliminate you entirely. They wanted you living but muted, existing while doubting your own mind. That was the ritual to make your own reflection your adversary. And here's where it becomes more profound. They nearly succeeded, didn't they? There were instances where you found yourself wondering, am I misreading this? Perhaps it is me. Maybe I am too perceptive. Maybe I truly am the issue. That's how psychological conflict operates. It doesn't shout at you. It murmurs uncertainties into your thoughts until you're battling yourself more than you're battling them. And once you're doubting yourself, you're simpler to manage. But here's what they failed to anticipate. Perception. That calm, extremely sharp instinct the universe placed within you. It's not just a feeling, it's preservation. While they mocked you in secret, you were recording every subtle expression. While they performed their artificial concern, you noted the timing. While they acted out loyalty for the observers, you observed the minor betrayals, the small jabs concealed inside praises, the way quiet became agreement. They believed the anguish would obscure your vision, but anguish became the lens that uncovered every concealed flaw. Perception is a danger to deceivers because it compels them into the illumination they cannot exist in. And now here's what you must understand. Their campaign to tarnish you never described you. It described them. Observe the methods they employed. Falsehoods, rumors, public acts designed to humiliate you. Consider that. Secure individuals don't expend effort trying to soil someone else. Only the insecure do that. Only people who recognize they can't stand beside you untarnished will choose to throwing mud. And mud only adheres if you remain in it. You refused. That's why you're still radiant, and that's why they're still resentful. Let me explain it this way. Imagine a jewel pulled through mire. Does the mire alter the jewel? No, the mire is washed off and the jewel remains untainted. That's you. They tried to pull you through dirt because they wanted observers to see the grime, not the radiance beneath. But the more force they used, the more evident it became that you weren't like them. The audience might not have comprehended initially, but with time, the truth always emerges. And I know what you might be asking yourself now. If I was such a danger to them, why didn't they simply avoid me? The explanation is straightforward, because your being was already too powerful. Even in silence, you were a threat. Even when you said nothing, your essence created a disturbance they couldn't disregard. You reminded them of all they were not, and that caused them pain. So they attempted to shift attention to your imperfections to divert from their own stains. Here's another difficult truth. They weren't fighting you. They were fighting the image of themselves that your authenticity compelled them to witness. Your untarnished spirit made their decay unmistakable. And instead of evolving, instead of confronting themselves, they selected the coward's path. Attack the mirror, soil the glass, smear the reflection. But mirrors don't fracture easily, and you didn't break the way they anticipated. They desired your silence to be shame, but it became strategy. They desired your tears to be fragility, but they became lucidity. Let's discuss that silence for a moment. People may have questioned why you didn't retaliate, why you didn't protest louder, why you didn't reveal everything you understood. But that silence wasn't fragility. It was command. You understood that responding would only fuel the conflict. You understood that your composure was more disturbing than any explosion. And in holding back, you permitted their genuine nature to become visible without obstruction. That's why now, when the situation has calmed, the record is evident. You didn't have to yell. Time yelled for you. So what's the result? The very humiliation they designed for your defeat became your testament of resilience. What was intended to stain you finished by staining them. What was intended to silence you finished by honing your message. And what was intended to bury you became the foundation where your perception took root and became stronger. And here's the aspect that causes them to lose sleep. You can't be shamed the same way again. Once you awaken, once you've recognized the patterns, you'll never succumb to the arrangement again. You'll enter spaces and identify the traps before they are even set. You'll detect the subtle insult in the praise, the betrayal in the greeting, the falsehood in the smile. And that makes you unbreakable. That makes you invulnerable. That makes you the one thing they can't tolerate. A survivor with awareness fully open. So if you've been wondering why you had to experience it, here's your explanation. They attempted to soil you because they couldn't stand next to you. They attempted to pull you down because your very existence was evidence of everything they did not possess. They wanted to erase you, but instead they revealed themselves. And now you carry that power forward, not just as someone who endured, but as someone who awakened, someone who comprehends the game and declines to participate, someone who recognizes that perception isn't just instinct, it's protection. And with that protection, you're entering every new space knowing you can't be affected the same way again. Once you've been pulled through mire and still glow, there's nothing left they can do to dim you. Number 2, rejection wasn't them dismissing you. It was existence removing their disguise. Rejection is seldom about your value. It's almost always a reflection revealing theirs. Let's begin with a stark fact. What you experienced wasn't rejection, not truly. It felt like rejection. Yes, indifference, false companions disappearing, opportunities denied. But beneath that pain, something more significant was occurring. It was a revelation. The universe wasn't penalizing you. It was examining every bond, every association, every hidden connection that couldn't accompany you into your next phase. That's why it hurt so precisely, so intensely. Every betrayal, every shame, every moment of being ridiculed or excluded. It wasn't accidental. It was precise. It was like being laid bare under a bright light. Not to harm you, but to reveal what you couldn't perceive on your own. Sometimes rejection isn't rejection. It's disclosure. It's the disguise falling off before the act can deceive you. Reflect on it. You believed people abruptly changed as if their intentions reversed suddenly. But the truth, they were simply showing you who they had always been. The rejection wasn't new. The performance just concluded. That silence, the smear campaigns, the subtle betrayals, they weren't coincidences. They were the universe drawing the curtain back, compelling you to witness unvarnished truth without disguise, without justifications. Now I understand the question forming in your thoughts, but why did it have to be so visible? Why did it have to be so public, so shameful, so chaotic? Because if it had been quiet, you would have rationalized it away. You would have continued making allowances for them privately. You would have carried useless burdens, false masks, and concealed threats into your destiny. That could not occur. So, the universe ensured it was unmistakable, loud enough to resonate, painful enough to imprint itself into your memory, definitive enough that you could never ignore it again. Envision this. You're carrying a pack you don't realize is filled with weights. It feels heavy, but you've carried it so long that you think it's normal. Then abruptly, someone removes it from your shoulders in the middle of a group. You feel exposed, humiliated, angry even. But later you realized they didn't take from you. They released you. That's what rejection truly was. They were taking away weights disguised as allies. The things you lost weren't losses at all. They were deceptions dissolving under the weight of reality. You didn't lose genuine relationships. You lost disguises. You didn't lose chances. You lost diversions disguised as opportunities. What you gained was vision. You learned to interpret the strain in a false smile. You learned to detect the venom in a kind tone. You learned to trust your instinct the first time, instead of waiting for proof. That perception was purchased with pain, but it's invaluable. Now let's pose another question. If I was being purified, why did it feel like penalty? Why did it feel like everyone was opposed to me? Because revelation feels harsh and firmament. It feels like the foundation disintegrating beneath you. But purification is never soft. Think of fire purifying gold. Think of tempest clearing dead limbs from trees. Think of surgery opening the injury before recovery can begin. None of that feels compassionate, but all of it is essential. Envision a surgeon entering the operating room with gloves, a scalpel, and a bright light. If you don't understand what's occurring, it looks like an assault. You're restrained, cut open, revealed in front of observers. But it's not penalty. It's accuracy. It's preserving your life. That's what your rejection was. Surgical revelation. It removed what was decaying, what was false, what was designed to keep you captive in silence. They didn't cast you out. You were liberated. They didn't reject you. You were redirected. And let's be honest, you saw the patterns, didn't you? You observed the timing. You observed how rapidly loyalty collapsed the moment you didn't comply. You observed how some people celebrated your setback a little too enthusiastically, as if they'd been anticipating it all along. That wasn't chance. That was revelation. You weren't losing supporters. You were uncovering who was never beside you. Envision standing under an ultraviolet light in a dark space. Initially, everything appears acceptable. But once the light activates, the stains become visible. The grime illuminates. The concealed disorder can't be overlooked. That's what occurred when rejection struck. The ultraviolet light switched on. The people around you couldn't maintain their genuine nature concealed anymore. And now you're positioned in a different place. What felt like loss became purification. What appeared like isolation became protection. You weren't being penalized. You were being readied. Because where you're headed, only the authentic can accompany. Everything false had to be removed publicly, painfully and irrevocably. Rejection isn't the universe holding you down. It's the universe pulling you through. And here's the most potent part. You'll never perceive rejection the same way again. The next time someone tries to push you aside, you'll hesitate and ask, is this rejection or is this safeguarding? That's perception. That's lucidity. And once you possess that, you cease pleading to join tables that poison your spirit. You cease pursuing doors that were never intended to open for you. You cease grieving over disguises that fell off and broke. So let me tell you this with directness. You weren't rejected. You were refined. You weren't excluded. You were extracted. And now every step you take forward is lighter, sharper, cleaner. The ritual of shame attempted to break you, but all it did was reveal the room and show you who belonged and who didn't. And you, awakened one. You didn't just endure it, you perceived it. And once you've perceived, you can never be deceived again. Number 3, they didn't want you eliminated. They wanted you confined and subdued. Your silence was more valuable to them than your end, because silence meant they could continue consuming without opposition. Let's remove the mask from this one. They didn't want you gone. Death would have been too evident, too disorderly, too simple to reveal. No, their scheme was more sinister. They wanted you alive but unfeeling. They wanted you functioning but detached. They wanted you questioning your own ideas, rethinking your every instinct, gradually severing the connection between you and your internal guidance. Because once you no longer trusted yourself, they understood they could manipulate you without any effort. And that's the warped cleverness of it. Adversaries don't always appear with weapons or open dangers. The most hazardous ones smile while they implant seeds of uncertainty. They laugh while introducing poison into the discussion. Every jest contains a sting. Every praise holds a shadow. Over duration, they make you believe that your light is an inconvenience, that your presence is excessive, that your truth is risky. Envision this. A bird isn't killed. It's confined in a cage with the door open, but the bird has been conditioned to think it can't fly. That's what they wanted for you, not your end, your restriction. They wanted you diminishing into the background, thinking humility meant quieting yourself when really it was conditioning. Some adversaries don't want to destroy you. They want to keep you small enough to utilize. And here's the most cruel part. They wanted you to disqualify yourself. They wanted you to carry disgrace so profoundly that you'd cease pursuing opportunities, cease appearing confidently, cease using your voice. That method. They could continue feeding on your energy while ensuring you never realized how potent you actually are. But then something occurred they never anticipated. Your perception activated. That instinct, that calm understanding, that murmur. This isn't correct. You started noticing the tone changes, the indirect compliments, the false encouragement. You didn't erupt, and that's what frightened them most. You watched. You withdrew. You protected your spirit. Now the end result they dreaded most is facing them. You're still alive, still progressing, and now you perceive everything. And once you perceive, you can never be confined again. Number 4. Your public shame activated the signal that revealed their concealed network. The day they attempted to disgrace you, they didn't just reveal their animosity. They revealed their entire structure of control. Let's be direct. The moment they dragged your name through the mud in public, they triggered a signal they couldn't silence. Abruptly, people who hardly knew you had something to say. Strangers averted their gaze when you entered the space. Whispers spread like fog in an enclosed area. Initially, it felt unbelievable. Why was everyone involved in your setback? But then it became clear. You hadn't just been confronting individuals. You had been confronting a system of control, a hidden network of rumor, manipulation, and false allegiance. Some adversaries don't combat alone. They move in groups bound by fear and dysfunction. And your awakening, it ignited their fragile structure. You became a danger the moment you refused to diminish. The instant you started safeguarding your peace, establishing limits and questioning their games, they shifted from passive subtlety to open hostility, not because you injured them, but because you stopped allowing them to manage you like a marionette. Envision this. You switch on the light in a dark cellar. Pests scatter in every direction. They were always present. You just couldn't see them until the light revealed them. That's precisely what your shame ritual did. It showed who was murmuring behind closed doors, who smiled to your face but sneered in your absence, who pretended to be neutral but quietly fed the conflict. That wasn't chaos. That was coordination. And here's the key. Coordination doesn't originate from strength. It originates from fear. They feared what might occur if you spoke up, if you revealed what they couldn't suppress. If your truth spread wider than their falsehoods, you became their mirror. And mirrors frighten people who exist in denial. They believed shaming you would separate you. Instead, it exposed their alliance. Public shame wasn't just penalty. It was a concealment, a frantic attempt to shift the spotlight away from themselves. But in trying to destroy you, they finished by revealing every system they wanted to keep hidden. And you, awakened one, didn't just endure it, you deciphered it. Now you understand they were never random individuals. They were a structure. And the moment you survived, the structure fractured. Number 5, perception isn't an ability. It's the weapon that preserved you. What they named suspicion was truly your radar protecting you from their snares. Let's state this clearly. Perception is not some mild characteristic you possess like a personality trait. For you awakened one, perception has been the distinction between survival and ruin. While most people treat intuition like background sound, occasionally noting it, frequently disregarding it, you've lived through betrayals concealed in smiles. You've witnessed sabotage hiding behind assisting hands. You didn't have the privilege of dismissing your instincts. Preservation demanded you hone them until they became an armament. Think of it like this. While everyone else is moving blindfolded, you're navigating with enhanced vision. Your perception isn't a murmur. It's an alarm. It analyzes every word, every gesture, every pause in the atmosphere. You don't just sense energy. You monitor it. You detect the delay in someone's laughter, the sharpness concealed in a compliment, the abrupt silence that speaks more loudly than words. To outsiders, it looks uncanny, even doubtful. To you, it's straightforward. Your life has relied on it. Perception isn't chance. It's your internal radar warning. Move now, or you'll regret it later. And how many times did it save you from the relationship that appeared ideal in theory, but would have exhausted your spirit? From the chance that was really a cage, disguised as a gift, from spaces where your name was already being criticized before you even entered. That wasn't coincidence. That was your radar intercepting the ambush before it struck. Envision a soldier walking through a hazardous area. Everyone else walks casually, but you've learned to sense the ground shift under your feet. You halt where others proceed. You move when others freeze. That's what perception has done for you. And here's what disturbs your adversaries most. They can't anticipate you. They believe you should have been trapped, shamed, erased. But somehow every time you evade their snares, they name it suspicion. They name it chance. But deeply they understand the truth. You saw through their disguises before they even finished positioning them. Awakened ones don't speculate. They know. And when you know, you don't require proof. You simply move, alive and invulnerable. That's why you're still standing. Because perception wasn't just your gift. It was your weapon, and you used it skillfully. Number 6. They tested you like a danger because your truth shattered their deceptions. They didn't test you to comprehend you. They tested you to break you because your very existence demonstrated their lies couldn't endure. Be certain, awakened one. They never tested you from curiosity. It wasn't admiration. It wasn't respect. It was fear. Fear of what you carried. Fear of what your presence revealed without you even intending. You didn't enter waving flags or proclaiming your value. You simply appeared with a genuine heart, clear purposes, and no hidden motives, and that alone rattled them fundamentally. You were proof that recovery is achievable, proof that forgiveness doesn't demand retaliation, proof that someone can walk through adversity and still emerge unscathed, still compassionate, still uncorrupted. You didn't just speak truth, you represented it. And for people who constructed their survival on manipulation and control, your presence wasn't reassuring. It was confronting. You were the mirror they never requested. And mirrors don't deceive. Think of it like this. Counterfeit currency appears genuine until it's placed beside the authentic bill. That's what your life did to them. You revealed the flaws they worked so hard to conceal. You weren't attempting to reveal them, but your decisions, your energy, your dignity, all of it became the proof they couldn't imitate. So they had to test you. Not to understand you, but to discredit you. They wanted to know if your light was real or just another act like theirs. That's why they challenged you, ridiculed you, and provoked you. They needed to see if you'd fracture under strain, if you'd retaliate, if you'd yield like they would. But you didn't. You stood. You maintained your dignity after they stripped you of everything. And that's when they realized you weren't one of them. You couldn't be purchased. You couldn't be transformed. You couldn't be controlled. You weren't excessive. You were too authentic for their deceptions to survive. That's why they named you too perceptive or too profound. It wasn't truth. It was projection. Because what you carried endangered everything false about them, and that's why they treated you like an adversary. Not because you attacked them, but because you demonstrated simply by existing that they could not deceive permanently. Number 7. When their shadow games failed, they constructed a spectacle to divert from their loss. The louder they yelled about you, the clearer it became. They had nothing remaining but sound. It always starts in the shadows, murmurs behind closed doors, mishaps that weren't mishaps. Subtle arrangements designed to drain you gradually, all while keeping their involvement hidden. They wanted you to collapse without anyone ever connecting it to them. But you didn't. You noticed. You adapted. You continued appearing when they anticipated you to disappear. And that disturbed them. Private sabotage only functions when you're unaware of it. But once your awareness opened, their control slipped. The subtlety lost its effect. The quiet sabotage lost its potency, and that's when fear drove them into despair. If they couldn't destroy you in silence, they would drag you into the spotlight and create a spectacle around your name. When murmurs fail, the cowardly turn to noise. Envision this. A thief discovered in the act. Abruptly, they start yelling about another person, hoping the crowd looks away from their offense. That's what they did. They inflated your flaws. They dragged your history into spaces where it didn't belong. They distorted stories, exaggerated errors, and amplified the volume sufficiently to overwhelm your truth. It wasn't about facts. It was about force. But here's where their scheme misfired. They believed shame would silence you. They believed spectacle would isolate you. Instead, the more they yelled, the more obvious their fixation became. People started to observe. When someone expends that much energy tearing down someone who isn't even resisting, questions start being posed. Who's truly the issue here? Why are they so invested in destroying you if you're insignificant? Their spectacle wasn't your exposure. It was their admission. The stage they built to shame you became the spotlight on their own illness. Every accusation revealed their fixation. Every smear revealed their insecurity. And you endured. You didn't collapse. You didn't retaliate. You let their fire extinguish under its own weight. Ultimately, you outlasted their spectacle. And that endurance wasn't just triumph. It was proof. Proof that you were never the issue. Proof that their control had already vanished. Number 8. They attempted to bury you in disgrace, but you transformed it into air. Disgrace was their weapon, but it became your training field. Comprehend this. Humiliation wasn't the final objective. Their real ritual was disgrace. They wanted you suffocated, repeating their words repeatedly, questioning yourself long after they stopped talking. Their goal was straightforward: make you oppose yourself. Because once you're in conflict with your own reflection, they don't even have to make an effort. But you didn't sink. You adapted gradually, painfully, powerfully. Every time they pulled you deeper, something within you changed. You weren't just descending, you were transforming. You began to see the tricks for what they were. The psychological manipulation, the blame shifts, the distorted truths. They lost their power when you stopped trying to reason with people who needed you to play the antagonist. They believed silence meant defeat. It truly meant evolution, envision being thrown into an ocean without warning. Initially you panic, you struggle against the waves, you inhale water, but then you learn. You discover rhythm in the chaos. You develop adaptability. That's precisely what occurred to you in an environment so toxic others would collapse. You learned to remain clear-headed. You constructed peace in the center of storms. The very disgrace meant to suffocate you became your air. Those assaults sharpened your emotional awareness. The same spaces that once affected you became training fields. The same insults that once harmed you became information points. Where others would sink, you became a deep diver, able to interpret currents before they even formed. They didn't realize teaching you to breathe in difficulty only made you unstoppable. Now, when manipulation appears, you don't panic. You've already trained in more profound waters. You know how to identify the change in tone, the trap in a compliment, the game before it even starts. They wanted you frightened of the depths, but now you are the depths. They can't sink you in disgrace anymore because you've transformed it into your strength. And that's the irony. They tried to bury you, but instead they constructed your resilience. You no longer fear the weight of their words. You don't suffocate in their silence. You breathe where others choke. That's why their rituals failed. You didn't just endure them, you mastered them. Number 9, they concealed chains in the words love and loyalty, but it was a ritual of sacrifice. Not every I love you is love. Sometimes it's the packaging around a prison. They didn't approach you with blades in their hands. They came with gentle words: love, loyalty, family. Words designed to make you lower your defense. Words you desired so intensely to trust. And for a period you did. But beneath those phrases was never love. It was a ritual. A slow, systematic conditioning for sacrifice disguised as concern. Every worry they expressed wasn't protection. It was restraint. Every favor they offered wasn't kindness. It was a snare. Every time they named it loyalty. What they truly meant was control. And the family, they pledged it wasn't a home. It was a prison. The most lethal blade isn't metal. It's manipulation wrapped in affection. The knife they prepared for you was never physical. It was psychological. The scheme was the gradual death of your potential, your joy, your future. They wanted you depleted yet appreciative. That was the deception. They wanted you to thank them while they exhausted you. But your perception wouldn't permit it. Even when your mind couldn't clarify it, your spirit detected the pattern. You saw how assistance always came with conditions. You observed how love always demanded your quiet. You understood what they named protection was really preparation for your downfall. Envision a lamb being led with decorations around its neck, believing it's cherished, while in reality it's being groomed for sacrifice. That's what they attempted to make of you. But you awakened before the blade could drop. Once you recognized that a leash is not love, you ceased mistaking captivity for concern. The truth shocked you, but it also liberated you. Because once you saw the ritual for what it was, you ceased playing their game. You ceased mistaking manipulation for dedication. You ceased surrendering your power in the name of loyalty. The knife they raised was never intended for your body. It was intended for your spirit. But you survived. Your perception shattered the illusion completely. And now, instead of departing drained, you depart alive, wiser, and invulnerable. Number 10, your spirit was the mirror. They couldn't avoid it, so they attempted to shatter it. They didn't despise you for what you did. They despised you for what your presence revealed. The venom they directed at you was never truly about you. It was about the reflection you presented without even intending. Your spirit, uncorrupted and pure, became a mirror they couldn't tolerate. You weren't just yourself. You were a reminder of everything they buried, denied, and concealed with falsehoods. For years, they constructed walls around their shame. They covered flaws with excuses, painted decay with artificial smiles, and mastered the skill of performance to conceal regret. Then you appeared. Not loud, not aggressive, just honest, pure and untwisted. And abruptly, all their carefully concealed deterioration illuminated in your presence like mold under an ultraviolet light. Your truth didn't offend them. It revealed them. That's why their anger felt so irrational, so venomous. They weren't angry because you harmed them. They were angry because you reminded them of the divide between who they pretended to be and who they truly were. That divide was intolerable. And instead of confronting it, they turned their fury on you. Envision someone standing before a mirror. They don't like what they see. Instead of changing themselves, they smash the glass. That's what they attempted to do to you. Your spirit was their mirror, and rather than heal, they attacked the reflection. They believed if they broke you, they could erase the truth you carried. But mirrors don't disappear when shattered. The truth still looks back. Unavoidable. They fought you not because you were their adversary, but because you made denial impossible. So they struck out. They attempted to dim your light, to distort your words, to pull you down into their shadow. But here's the revelation. They failed because their hatred was projection, their venom was fear, and their war was never with you. It was with the reflection they couldn't bear to confront. And you endured. While their spirit sank in shadow, yours remained pure. While they collapsed under denial, you survived under truth. That's why their hate felt so heavy. It wasn't personal, it was survival. But the reflection remains, and so do you. Number 11. What they named bullying was existence identifying you as distinct. They believed they were mocking you, but they were marking you with evidence you'd never belonged to their group. Let's state this directly. What occurred to you wasn't ordinary bullying. It appeared like that on the surface, certainly. The murmurs, the laughter, the staged humiliation, but it was more significant. It was initiation, a brutal transition that disguised itself as rejection. The world may have named it shame, but in truth, it was the beginning of your elevation. Here's the paradox. They'll never confess. Real power rarely arrives dressed in comfort. It almost always comes wrapped in dishonor. The deeper the fall appears in public, the higher the ascent in private. You weren't randomly selected. You were singled out, identified, pressed through adversity. Not because you were weak, but because you were being separated from the crowd that could never travel where you're destined. Rejection isn't always cruelty. Sometimes it's a mark that you don't belong with the ordinary. Most people are designed to assimilate. They conform to trends, blend into surroundings, play life secure. But you were never made for that. You were shaped for solitude, the kind of separation that only leaders can bear. And the only method to separate someone apart from the masses is through public rejection. That was your stamp. That was your crown being positioned in disguise. Envision a soldier being broken down in training, stripped, tested, mocked before being built into something unshakable. That's what your humiliation was. It was less an assault and more a marking. It identified you as distinct. It proved you weren't theirs to break. They wanted to erase you, but instead they crowned you with resilience no crowd can acquire. The disgrace they threw at you was intended to silence you, but it amplified you instead. It forced you totally on yourself in methods the average person will never comprehend. It sharpened clarity, created strength, and built a resilience that only separation can form. They wanted you erased. Instead, they revealed you were never made for the crowd. You were made for the throne. And the throne is only discovered when you stand apart. Number 12, they labeled you unstable because your lucidity exposed their delusion. When truth enters the space, falsehoods always scream unstable. They threw every term they could at you. Unstable, suspicious, sensitive, delusional. Not because those terms described you, but because they were desperate to protect themselves. Labels weren't reflections. They were armaments. They weren't statements of fact. They were shields intended to guard their fragile illusions from the light you carried. They didn't call you unstable because you lost your mind. They called you unstable because your clarity was cutting through their narratives like a blade. You saw through their flaws, their artificial smiles, their unstable stories. You refused to participate, and that terrified them. So they performed the oldest trick available. discredit the messenger so they could bury the message. They call you suspicious when you observe patterns. They call you sensitive when your emotions expose their indifference. They call you delusional when your vision extends further than their shallow falsehoods. Every insult they attached on you was really a confession of what they feared most. They weren't describing you, they were describing their panic in the face of your lucidity. Envision a fragile structure built tall and unstable. All it requires is one breeze to show how unstable it is. That breeze was you. Your presence made their falsehoods tremble. Your sanity was the danger, not your supposed instability. And observe them now silent. Their silence is more audible than all the terms they once yelled. They know the truth is on your side. They know the flaws in their foundation are expanding. That calm they wear, it isn't strength, it's fear. Fear that the truth you carry will crush the illusions they exist in. Your lucidity was never fragility. It was the proof their entire system couldn't survive. They wanted the world to see you as unstable. But the opposite is true. Your sharp vision, your perception, your refusal to yield to their games, that's what makes you invulnerable. The labels were never about you. They were diversions thrown up to distract from their own decay. And now, as their falsehoods crumble, the reflection staring back at them terrifies them more than anything else. Number 13, they mistook your silence for defeat, but it was the calm before their collapse. Restraint isn't fragility. It's the sharpest weapon patience can create. They believed your silence meant surrender. They saw your calm, your refusal to engage, your unwillingness to struggle with them, and they laughed. They misinterpreted restraint for brittleness. They assumed mocking you, betraying you, and pressuring you would eventually break you. But here's what they never comprehended. Restraint is not surrender. Restraint is strategy. You didn't require physical force. You didn't require loud conflicts. You became an observer in plain sight. You watched. You remembered. You interpreted the patterns. Every slip of the tongue, every inconsistency, every mask falling out of position, it all entered your mental record. While they thought you were powerless, you were quietly gathering the evidence of their downfall. Silence doesn't mean nothing is occurring. It means everything is occurring where they can't perceive it. They mocked your calm, but calm was your weapon. You understood the truth doesn't require sound. It only requires duration, and duration was always on your side. While they worked extensively to bury facts, those same facts resurfaced like air bubbles rising from the depths. Unavoidable, unstoppable, impossible to conceal. Envision someone trying to hold an inflatable ball underwater. The harder they push, the more force it accumulates. That's what your silence did. It wasn't retreat. It was pressure accumulating beneath the surface, waiting for the correct moment to release. And now it's occurring. The truth is emerging through murmurs, through flaws in discussions, through undeniable patterns that even their allies can't disregard anymore. The beauty of it, you never had to force it. You didn't plead, you didn't yell, you didn't struggle for validation. The truth spoke without you making an effort. They believed restraint meant you were finished. In reality, it meant you were finished observing. Your silence was never cowardice. It was wisdom. It was control. And now, as the truth performs its work, the same silence they mocked has become their greatest fear, because you never surrendered. You simply let reality do what it always does. Emerge. Number 14. You didn't just survive the ritual. You now possess the guide to dismantle it. The system failed to destroy you, and in failing, it handed you its secrets. You didn't wander through humiliation like some unfortunate casualty. You lived through a program, an organized cycle designed to isolate, ridicule, manipulate, and then offer false reconciliation once you fractured. That's the script they execute. Break you, then offer you an artificial rescuee so you never question who ignited the conflict in the first place. But here's the revelation. They miscalculated. You didn't break. You deciphered it. You saw their weapons for what they were. Disgrace used it as control. Loyalty distorted into a leash. Concern repackaged as a snare. Every tactic revealed itself to you one by one. And because you survived, you now hold something priceless. The blueprint, the very guide for dismantling the same system they tried to bury you inside. Your scars aren't just memories. They are guides. Your story is no longer just pain. It's a guide, a set of instructions for those still caught in the labyrinth. You can show them where the traps are concealed, how manipulation disguises itself, and how to walk away with spirit whole. What was intended to erase you has become clarity. Knowledge and armament. Envision escaping a locked room, then handing the key to everyone else still inside. That's what you carry now. Your perception didn't just save you, it shattered their program's greatest advantage: silence, confusion, and self-doubt. You proved their love was nothing but control. You exposed their loyalty as nothing but chains. And by doing so, you broke their monopoly on truth. You aren't just free, you're the evidence that freedom is achievable. Your survival isn't just survival, it's revolution. You didn't just endure humiliation, you transformed it into intelligence. You transformed it into a weapon they can never reclaim. And now your existence itself is a danger to the system, because you carry the very instructions for breaking it apart. They tried to sacrifice you. Instead, you became the one thing they feared most, the blueprint for freedom. And here's the truth. Awakened One, what was intended to humiliate you only crowned you with clarity. You survived the ritual. You decoded the program, and now you walk with a strength they can't erase. Their disgrace became your proof. Their games became your training, and their collapse became your ascent. You are the evidence they never wanted revealed. If this message resonated with your spirit, press the like button, subscribe for more, and leave the number 77 in the comments so I know you're claiming your survival. Shareth is with another Awakened One. Let the blueprint expand.